Hey guys, it's Holly, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 LEGO Harry Potter Advent Calendar, and spoilers, it's not that good. Kicking off the 2022 Advent Calendar, we firstly have a mini build from Ollivanders, and the way that this Advent Calendar is done is that there are 3 builds from each of the 8 movies, and they are all sort of tied together by this little base plate coloring. I mean, the mini build for Ollivanders is pretty cute, and it was easily recognizable for the most part, so I do appreciate that, because there are some of the builds in the Advent Calendar where that is just not the case. Second to tie in, we had this little Quidditch build, which to me doesn't really, feel all too right. I'm not necessarily sure why there are all of those colored tiles at the back. I think the 3 hoops on their own would have been perfectly fine and sort of replicated that idea a little bit more. And then the third build for the Philosopher's Stone is a Harry Potter minifigure, which is nothing we haven't seen before. He's appeared in many, many sets. There's really not that much special about him, but I love how they've gone for the robe version of Harry, and he's a classic. I mean, it absolutely makes sense for the Philosopher's Stone, though it definitely isn't quite as exciting as some of the other ones in this set. But like all Harry Potter figures, of course, he has a double-sided torso as well as a double-sided face. Then we move on to the Chamber of Secrets, and the first build that there was this Whomping Willow section, which is built up really nicely using very minimal pieces, mostly just a bunch of wedges, complete with a tiny little flying forward Anglia, which is the exact same build as is featured in the microscale Hogwarts Castle. Secondly, we had the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, and this again was actually done really, really well considering the pieces that they had to have used. However, if you do take the snake off specifically, it looks like this statue has some very prominent red lips, but besides that, I think that this was really cleverly done and is probably one of the better builds throughout this Advent Calendar. And then finally, we had Moaning Myrtle, who is sort of a remake of the one that appeared in the CMF series. However, this time she's been done in a grayscale sort of thing, similarly to Nearly Headless Nick, however with a lot more grey and black, which I assume is to represent just how, I guess, sad and depressed she is, but otherwise all of the printing looks pretty much the same. It's just done on a different torso, but if you missed out on that CMF, it is definitely a great way to get her. However, at the same time, it is sort of a waste, I think, of this minifigure slot, considering this is a new minifigure, but at the same time it's something that we've already gotten before. Moving on to the Prisoner of Azkaban, next up we have this night bus build, which is definitely, again, one of my favorites, mostly just for the bus build itself. I mean, the lamppost is pretty cute and it comes complete with a sidewalk. However, this bus is so simple yet effective. I am a really, really big fan of how this one turned out. However, I do also have a soft spot for the night bus to begin with. Next up is probably one of the weaker builds when it comes to this Advent Calendar, which is basically just the Dementor's kiss from the end of the Prisoner of Azkaban. I mean, it gets the idea across, and again, you can sort of tell what scene it is. I think the trees are pretty well done, and I like the fact that one of the Dementors is flying off of it. Just the fact that you also get the microscale Dementors to begin with is pretty cute, especially considering we haven't seen that piece come out since the release of the Darth Vader castle, and that time it was in a transparent blue sort of hologram type of thing. But otherwise, I mean, this build just really isn't that interesting, nor do I think this scene is that memorable overall. And lastly for our minifigure is this brand new version of Sirius Black, and at first I was so confused to where this outfit actually came from. However, upon closer inspection and sort of going through the movie, I realized that this is actually his outfit from his Azkaban prison poster. This outfit is just so obscure that I question why it was even made, but at the same time, I appreciate that we got something brand new, completely different. I mean, I think it would be really cool if someone made like a mock of the Prisoner of Azkaban poster. Otherwise, I don't necessarily see a real reason to have this minifigure. However, that Azkaban prison tile, on the other hand, is definitely a very welcome addition. Overall, it's really cool, just I think very, very niche and very obscure for something like this. Next up, we have the Goblet of Fire, and this has been remade so many times at this point, it is insane. Now, one thing that was really interesting about this one is that I actually got a duplicate of this day. I had these 2 bags that were just like absolutely stuck together and ended up getting the same build twice, which in my case was really lucky considering this is one of the days that actually had a special sort of unique printed piece, considering there is a nice printed tile of Harry Potter's name written on parchment. But otherwise, the build for this is very basic. I honestly think though it's probably one of the better Goblet of Fire builds. However, it just feels a little small overall considering what the tower is meant to look like. However, that printed parchment piece, while again something that wasn't necessary, I guess, and again quite obscure just like Sirius Black, is a very welcome thing considering how much I guess we have been getting from the Goblet of Fire. It is nice to have another thing that just sort of completes what we could have from that movie. Speaking of things though that have been made several times, we have the Triwizard Cup. I mean, just like the Goblet of Fire, this has been made so many times that quite frankly I'm a bit bored of it. Like, there aren't too many different versions that you can get. This just feels really weak to me and is probably one of the more boring designs. Next up, we have a brand new Voldemort who not only has a brand new exclusive face, he also has a brand new torso. Now this of course is meant to represent him at the graveyard, and overall I really like the face on him. I think it is so clever and so unique and a really nice different change for Voldemort. I definitely don't think the torso needed to be changed or adjusted in any sort of way, but it is quite nice that they did go further and change a few things. Moving along, and now we have the Order of the Phoenix, and first up is this build. Now quite frankly, I did not realize what this was meant to represent for a very long time. It took me several hours to comprehend that this was actually meant to represent the Room of Requirement. This build does not translate the location it is meant to represent at all, and I also don't understand why this design was chosen. I mean, I get that the Room of Requirement's a big thing for the Order of the Phoenix, but to me this just does not make sense, and often I forget what it is meant to be. A little bit better, but just as bland, is the Department of Mysteries. Really, this is just like a weird archway with a couple of transparent studs meant to represent prophecies. Unlike the Room of Requirement though, it does get the idea across, so I'll give it that, but it's equally just as boring and I feel like very plain. Then to round out the Order of the Phoenix, we have a new Tonks minifigure who is slightly different to the one that appeared in Grimmauld Place, so if you didn't have the amount of money to get that set, this is definitely a very good and cheap way to get a hold of that minifigure, and she actually has a different face this time around, complete with a duck face, which I think is perfect. And if you do have Grimmauld Place, at least you're getting something that is different and not getting the exact same minifigure twice, which I really appreciate. This time around she does just have the one hair piece, but overall I really like this Tonks minifigure, and again she's one of the better things in the advent calendar. Another excellent addition from the advent calendar is this Horace Slughorn as the couch. I think this is absolutely genius and was such a great way to throw in another character without actually making it a minifigure. The only thing that I don't like about this is that I feel like he could have been better done if it wasn't limited to this 2x4 plate thing that is going on with this advent calendar. Comparatively though, there is the Pensieve, and this bowl and this build is pretty solid overall when it comes to advent calendar builds, but in terms of Pensieve builds, I don't think that this is one of the better ones. It's certainly a step up from the clock tower, but overall again it is just a little bit bland. But it's not quite as bland as our minifigure for the Half-Blood Prince, which is Professor Snape. Now don't get me wrong, it does make sense for him to be the minifigure, however this version of Snape is just so boring to me. Like, I do not like the redone version. I much preferred the one with the coattails just to give him a little bit more extra printing, and I just feel like Snape is such like a basic character. We've had him in quite a few sets that I think we could have got someone or some outfit even that is a little bit more exciting and different and special than Snape. As we start to wrap up this year's advent calendar, our first build from the Deathly Hallows Part 1 is Hagrid's motorbike flying over what I presume to be some rooftops. I don't necessarily think that part was done all too well, but I really feel like this tiny motorbike build, considering the scale, is actually done pretty neatly, and it's definitely though something that I would love to see appear in a proper Harry Potter set, and I feel like especially with the Deathly Hallows Part 1 it would have been harder to pull things out of that were iconic to that movie and could be well represented in mini build, which is why it doesn't surprise me that they also went for a mini build of the Burrow, which again translates really well given the scale. I think it's an amazing little micro build, and it's certainly a lot better than the final aspect of the Deathly Hallows Part 1 advent calendar, which is just Hedwig as well as the spinner top, which really ties into this whole concept of the advent calendar being a game. However, this spinner top doesn't actually work really well as a spinner top. It doesn't really spin, it doesn't really do an awful lot, and to me the game aspect of it is overall kind of boring. I feel like it's just a very gimmicky thing. I think 2021 worked a lot better, and I think they were just trying to replicate the success of that, I guess, but it just didn't hit for me, and overall this day was a major letdown. And lastly, kicking off the Deathly Hallows Part 2, we have Gringotts complete with the Ukrainian item belly. It's amazing to get it in micro build form and to see this part of the movie represented in the advent calendar, and I think the mini build is fantastic, especially of the dragon, but I really want to see this in a major set, hopefully for next year, but at least this mini build is really good. And the last mini build for the advent calendar is of course a tiny little Hogwarts Express, complete with platform, which again, I think this is really well done. It's not the first time we've seen a micro scale Hogwarts Express. In fact, we got it in the first Harry Potter advent calendar, but again, given the proportions of the 2x4 plate, I think this is really well done. And I love how as well the platform was featured and ties in really nicely to the very end of the story being the epilogue. And our final minifigure is Neville from the Battle of Hogwarts, and he is really the reason why I was excited with this advent calendar to begin with. I just really wanted to have an updated version of him with his brand new and exclusive torso. He also as well comes along with our beautiful molded Sword of Gryffindor, which I think is one of the best pieces that LEGO Harry Potter has put out in recent years. I'm really glad that he's made an appearance, and I also hope that he comes in a future potential Battle of Hogwarts set. I think that would be really cool. But Neville to me was definitely the big draw to this advent calendar, because otherwise I really feel like it was a letdown. Like, here are my least favorite builds out of the entire advent calendar. I just feel like these were very weak, hard to recognize, and overall really not that exciting or special in any way. And then countering that, here are my 5 favorite builds from the advent calendar, which I think were definitely a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting, and overall just really well done. Overall, this advent calendar wasn't overly too festive, I feel like, and it really just felt like a random assortment of different things throughout the Harry Potter universe, some of which were done really well, others were not done quite so well, and unless you were able to pick this up when it was 25% off, 30% off, 40% off, I would probably steer away from this and probably just buy the things that you want from this advent calendar on Bricklink or something like that. But let me know your thoughts on this set down in the comments below. Happy December and happy holidays. And until next time, guys, I'll see you later.